our self-study online training program. This class is the remains of process starting from 8.5. Let's see production and service provision.
Hi guys, it's Luke here from LH Consulting, back with another video. Today I want to take you through clause 8.5 of 9001 2015, and that is entitled Production and Service Provision. As we always do, I want to talk you through another one of the 9001 2015 clauses. This time we're looking at Production and Service Provision, clause 8.5. So if we jump straight in, I can explain this clause in more detail and the sub-clauses that actually make that clause up. So first of all, I've wrote down the overall clause requirement. So what I consider to be the overall requirement of this clause is to ensure that product and service provision is a smooth process. So essentially that's what this clause is about. And it does run across some of the other clauses. You'll see if you've watched some of the other videos there are some conflicts. But in general, it's there to ensure that product and service provision is smooth. Okay, so what I've done here is I've kind of mapped out the different parts of the clause, or the sections of the sub-clause that make up clause 8.5. So we're running through these. So the first one is control of production and service provision. So that's essentially the first one. The second one is identification and traceability. The third subclause is property of customers and external providers. The fourth subclause is preservation. The fifth, post-delivery activities. And then finally, the control of any changes. And again, there's a conflict in some of these areas. You may have seen these sections before. Essentially here, we're now running through it and solidifying the arrangements from the initial control to the control of any changes following delivery of a product or service, and also any stage here. So we delve into the sub-clauses a bit more now. So first sub-clause we come to is 851, control of production and service provision. Here I've just put consider the organisation is to establish controls for providing products and services to achieve intended results and also to reduce potential non-conformities throughout the process. So essentially, organisation establish controls for providing products and services which meet the intended results and also reduce potential NCRs. Some examples of where I've put this could be achieved: examining the competencies of employees or external providers, any monitoring and measuring activities, anywhere where we can prevent human error, and also anywhere where we can make things more efficient or get rid of any interference. So that's the first subclause. Okay, so next clause, or subclause 852, it's entitled Identification and Traceability. What I've put here is consider implementing identification and traceability in the realms of products, processes and services. So some examples I've put here: you could have codes or templates for certain documentation. You could have part numbers physically identified on products. And if you've got an electronic server, you could have a file naming convention to keep things structured and simplified. So there's some ways that you can do identification and traceability. We're not just talking about parts, we're also talking about forms and documents. Again, conflict with documented information. And also, if you've got an electronic server, is simplifying and structuring that as well. Okay, so the next subclause is 853, and that's entitled Property Belonging to External Providers or Customers. So here what I've put is that you need to consider protecting the property not owned by the organisation. So it could be materials, data, equipment, or it could even be knowledge/expertise. So there's a whole range of things. Don't just think about free issue materials or customer owned materials. Think about the data you hold, the equipment, the knowledge and the expertise. I've put here identification of who owns the property. So if it's a customer-owned material or supplier-owned material. I have some examples here. I've put a physical identification, so that would be put on the product or the form or the document. A segregated area in the works or the manufacturing facility, just for them products or products which are owned by external providers / customers. You could have password protection if the documentation requires restrictions to access. I'm sure there's a whole host of other ways you can think of yourself. So that is clause or subclause 853. The next subclause is preservation. So what I put here is consider preserving outputs which could fall apart or affect the conformity / compliance of the product or service. So what I put here as examples could be in food, or if you've got to keep a chemical at a certain temperature, then you may have to consider that. Any backups, computer backups, server backups, IT backups, anything output which you could fall apart, preserving that could be maintained by a backup. And again, it could be cleanliness or housekeeping. You could be in a surgery, you could be in a veterinary practice. You know, you may need cleanliness and housekeeping to ensure the output of the product or service is kept at a good level, and where if it falls apart or it could affect the conformity or compliance, that we're preserving it. So again, you could probably think of a load of other ways you could maintain your outputs, preserve your outputs. Okay, the next subclause 855 is post-delivery activities. So what I put here is consider fulfilling requirements after a product or service has been delivered. So examples are customer satisfaction. So once the product or service has been received, are your customers happy with the service you provided? Any warranties? Is there a warranty on the product? Any technical support and any frequently asked questions? Do you offer aftercare support training? You know, think of these things. So after the product and service has been shipped or delivered, what do you offer to your customer after it has been delivered? So think about that and ways you can improve your service. Okay, the next subclause and the final subclause is 856, and that is entitled Control of Changes. So what I've said here is consider changes during product or service provision are reviewed and controlled. So I've said examples of this might be minutes of a review meeting if it's to change something, any testing results. For example, if something needs to be tested, a change needs to be tested to see if it works. What are the results of that test? Were they successful? Were they not successful? Were they part successful? A description of the change, what has been changed, how is it being changed, why, where, what has been changed. Consider the person who authorised the change. And finally here I've put it in bold writing because it is important, but I won't shout because I won't hurt your ears, is consider that all implications before implementing. So you need to do a risk assessment, say in your mind, or it could be on a whiteboard, or it could be a documented thing, or it could even go as detailed as being an FMEA, a failure mode effect analysis, is to say, if we were to change this, what would the implications be, not just at the end, but at every operational stage and also the planning stages within the business, and write that down somewhere, or ensure it's being done and approved, that change. Okay, and obviously that concludes today.
Let's see, this is important about non-conforming output.
Hi guys, it's Luke here from LH Consulting, back with another video. Today I want to talk you through another one of the ISO 9001 2015 clauses. That is clause 8.7, and it's entitled Control of Non-Conforming Outputs. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to break down the clause into what I feel it means in terms of systems implementation. So we know the clause is called control of non-conforming outputs. What does that actually mean, and what does it want from me? So the overall clause requirement I consider is to ensure the unintended delivery or use of non-conforming outputs, and then secondly, to ensure that the above information is documented. So there is documented information to prove the above and to show how the above was dealt with. So that's the idea of this clause. So it is to ensure the unintended delivery or use of a non-conforming output, either a product or a service, and then to ensure that the above is documented. So there's documented information. Okay, so what I've done here, and it's very, very simplistic, it just shows the two sub-clauses of clause 8.7. So clause 871 is control of non-conforming outputs, and clause 872 is requesting that the control of non-conforming outputs, and again how it's being dealt with, etc., is documented. So there is evidence of documented information so that it can be audited, there is a trail there, etc. So they are the sub-clauses that make up clause 8.7. So if we run through sub-clause 871 first, so sub-clause 871 is control of non-conforming outputs. So again, I'm just breaking down, giving you some considerations of what I would do to help me go through and try and comply with the requirements of clause 8.7. So I put consider, first of all, how you're going to identify non-conforming outputs, or identify non-conforming outputs. Where would they be in your product or service at each stage? So not just at the end or at delivery, we're talking about every stage, from initial design or procurement of materials till the product or service is delivered to the customer, and then after, really. Secondly, action to be taken. So is there repair work needed? So once you've identified, that non-conforming output, what action is to be taken? So is there going to be a repair? Are we going to rework something? Are we going to segregate if we found something during production? Are we going to segregate it from the works? Are we going to contain that product or service? Again, that would involve identification, labelling, maybe a quarantine area so that we can do further investigation. A return. Are we going to have to inform the customer, and now return, inform customer, and recall? This will be after the product's delivered. So again, we're talking about every stage here. And also, let's worth noting, it might not be one of these stages, it could be several stages. So it could involve informing a customer of a product recall, and when it comes back in, it could involve a rework or a repair. So we're not just talking about one here, we're talking about it could be several of these different actions to be taken. I've just put here as a concession of being agreed. So basically, once the customer has been informed that the goods are faulty or the service is faulty, do they want a credit? Do they want a refund? Or are they going to accept that product as faulty? Are they happy that it's 99% there and they're good with that? Or are they not going to accept that? Does it need to come back and a credit or a replacement sort? So consider that. I've just put inspection on corrected products. So once the product comes back, it's been dealt with, it's been repaired or reworked, or the service has been repaired or reworked, and we're saying yes, it's good to go. Ensure that again there's an inspection on that corrected product before it goes out the door again, just to double or triple check that we're not sending out another non-conforming output and putting ourselves right back in the beginning. And what I've said here, and this will make more sense when we do run through clause 10.2, which will be in a few weeks' time, is that if additional is required and we require additional investigation, we might want to use clause 10.2 corrective action in order to help us do this, but this will be looked at in a future video so do tune in for that one. Okay, second subclause is documented information. So what I've said is, again, consider, so in terms of documented information, what we want to see samples of is non-conforming outputs, so the identification of non-conforming outputs, any corrective actions. I've just put some samples of corrective action types, so it could be a mitigation to reduce a risk, a concession, or again it could be communication to a customer. We've got one product in or service in which is faulty, we trace it back to a batch, and then everything that was under that batch, we then email that customer if the batch has gone out, or part of the batch has gone out to a particular customer, and say, yes, this batch is faulty, let's get a recall in. So having the arrangements in place to do this is essential for ISO9001 2015. I've also put communication with the customer, so documented information, as we say, an email, a letter, a bulletin on a website, etc., etc., or a telephone call, but write down what's being said. Now, the next thing is authority within the organisation for release of non-conforming product or services. So what we mean by this is, within one of your written procedures, for example, a goods outward procedure, you could say this person, so the goods out inspector, will be responsible for the release of products or services. And again, once them products have come back in, sold, we think, and then going back out, that goods out inspector looks at them products again and checks them. So that should be in a procedure, documented information of who is responsible within the organisation for the release of products or services. And now what I've put here is examples of documented information include analysis of NC outputs. So we had this many customer issues, this many supplier issues, this many internal issues with production or with sales or with picking, etc. So an analysis of the outputs retained. And also you could include completed forms retained with products. For example, if you'd sent a delivery out with initial product, the customer accepted that product, and we could use that as a means of saying, look, we provided you this product, we agree it's 99% there, but you accepted the goods. This could be a way of agreeing that the product is retained even though it is a non-conforming output, and agreeing an action to ensure it doesn't happen again. So having that thought process is essential again for 9001 2015. And really that concludes today's video. That is clause 8.7. I hope this video helped.
And now let's see clause 9, performance evaluation.
Clause 9.0 of the new ISO 9001 2015 Quality Management System talks about performance evaluation. Performance evaluation is a key step in the PDCA cycle. Without checkpoints, we will never know if we are on the right track. Clause 9.0 provides the checkpoint mechanisms in ensuring that the quality management system is adequate, compliant, and effective. The three sub-clauses under Clause 9.0 performance evaluation are the following: monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation, internal audit, management review. Customer satisfaction is one of the key indicators that must be monitored, measured, analyzed, and evaluated. A happy and satisfied customer is the true test of an effective quality management system. A company wishing to comply with the requirements of this clause must establish a robust process of obtaining customer feedback, gather data pertaining to the performance of the quality management system, and analyze these data for improvement. The organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the quality management system conforms the organization's own requirements for its internal quality management system, the requirements of this international standard, and is effectively implemented and maintained. The organization shall plan, establish, implement, and maintain an audit program including the frequency, methods, responsibilities, planning requirements, and reporting, which shall take into consideration the importance of the processes concerned, changes affecting the organization, and the results of the previous audits. Define the audit criteria and scope for each audit. Select auditors and conduct audits to ensure objectivity and the impartiality of the audit process. Ensure that the results of the audits are reported to relevant management and take appropriate correction and corrective actions without undue delay. Top management shall review the organization's quality management system at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, effectiveness, and alignment with the strategic direction of the organization. In conducting management review, ensure that the following are included in the discussion: the status of actions from previous management reviews, changes in external and internal issues that are relevant to the quality management system, information on the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system, including trends in customer satisfaction and feedback from relevant interested parties, the extent to which quality objectives have been met, process performance and conformity of products and services, non-conformities and corrective actions, monitoring and measurement of results, audit results, the performance of external providers, the adequacy of resources, the effectiveness of actions taken to address the risk and opportunities, and finally, opportunities for improvement. The outputs of management review shall include decisions and actions related to opportunities for improvement, any need for changes to the quality management system, and resource needs. Make sure to retain documented information as evidence of the results of management reviews. For more information on how your organization can be ISO certified, visit our website at www.agfconsultinggroup.
Okay, let's check internal audit.
Hi guys, it's Luke here from LH Consulting, back with another video. Today I want to go through another one of the ISO 9001 2015 clauses. That is clause 9.2 and it's entitled Internal Auditing. Really make our way through these clauses, so there will be additional standards coming up. I'm probably going to look through ISO 14001 next, so if you're interested in that, or there's a different standard you want me to look through, please let me know. So we get started and jump right in as we always do, and let's try and make compliance easy in terms of clause 9.2 of 9001 2015. So the overall clause requirement, really what this means to me in terms of you asking, Haley, what does this clause mean? Here's my summary. So I put to undertake internal audits at planned intervals in order to assess performance of the quality management system and also identify any areas for potential improvement. So that's my summary of this clause. So the clause is split into two sub-clauses. It's a general clause and then a clause which basically covers exactly what's required in terms of planning, implementation and subsequent follow-up of internal audits. So they're the two sub-clauses. So a general clause and a clause which actually says what you need to do in terms of planning, implementation and subsequent follow-up, so an internal audit clause, sub-clause. So general is obviously refer back to the summary or the overall clause requirement. I feel that really does cover that sub-clause. 9.2.2, which is the internal auditing sub-clause within here, I really think explains itself, but what I've done is I've kind of broke it down step by step how I would kind of plan, implement and maintain / follow up internal audits. So think about all these elements. I put consider, when auditing, consider covering all elements of the QMS or the quality management system, and also consider covering or making sure that your system covers the requirements of ISO 9001. The third party assessor that comes in to certify you will be checking that you are conforming to the requirements of 9001 or any other standard you may be implementing. However, it's important that you yourself do a check in order to make sure you're covering all clauses in that standard. Very important. Next is produce an internal audit program. So an internal audit program is really a plan of when your audits are going to be undertaken, who they're going to be undertaken by, what they're going to cover, etc. So I've kind of broke it down, give some examples of what you need to consider within that internal audit program. I put frequencies, so how often is an audit going to be done. If it's document control, management review, training, you might want to do it less than your production control procedure. You might want to do that 3 times a year. You might want to do your document control, your auditing procedure every year, once a year, once every 2 years. It's up to you. Methods, so consider the methods you're going to use to do your internal audits. Responsibilities, who's going to be responsible for doing their internal audits and who's going to be responsible for being an auditee or being audited. Very important. The planning requirements, the reporting and risk-based approach, so how is that internal audit program going to be reported? And also, as I said above, consider frequencies. What the standard would say is a risk-based approach kind of thing. So it's, if you've got a procedure where it's kind of static, like your policy manual or document control or something like that, and you're not really changing documents that regularly, then maybe consider doing them less than the sales and the purchasing procedure. So that's a risk-based approach. Now I put when producing the internal audit, so you've done your program, you've planned out the frequencies, the methods, the responsibilities, the planning requirements, reporting and the risk-based approach. Now you're going on to producing your internal audits. I put a breakdown of what I would do when doing the internal audits. So I put criteria used and scope covered to be defined. So consider the criteria. What is your criteria? So you're using QP02, which is your internal audit procedure. You're using the ISO9001 standard. You might be using an auditee's help or guidance or some guidance documents, so reference them as the criteria used and what you're actually auditing against. And then the scope to be covered, so if you're covering again internal audit and procedure, your scope could be an internal audit of the QP02 procedure within organisation name limited on this date, and that would be a sufficient scope. Select impartial auditors from the process, very important. So if you're auditing sales, don't get your sales manager to audit it. You want maybe someone from the purchasing department, someone from the quality department to maybe go in there and do that, who's impartial and won't look to make the results biased, so you get a clear picture. The next thing is reporting of audit issues to management or to relevant persons. So once you've done your audit, and you've got potentially some issues there, who do you need to discuss them with? Is it management? Is it other relevant persons within the organisation? And also on the back of that, what is going to be done in order to solve them issues or close them issues out? Next thing, moving on to, is implement correction and corrective actions. So the way I describe this is a correction is something you put in place to stop the problem originally, and a corrective action is something more long term that you put in place to attempt to stop the issue from ever happening again. So that's the difference between a correction and a corrective action. And finally is retain documented information. Keep documented information of the program, keep documented information of the internal audits, of the issues raised, and also any subsequent follow-up and closure. Very important. And finally, that actually concludes today's video. So nice easy one today. Hope that helped. At LH Consulting, we try
and let's see management review.
Hi guys, it's Luke here from LH Consulting, back with another video. Today I want to talk you through another one of the ISO 9001 2015 clauses, and we're moving through them pretty fast. It's clause 9.3, and that's entitled Management Review. Okay, so as always, I'm going to take you through this clause 9.3 of ISO 9001 2015, explain it in my own words and hopefully make compliance easy. That's what I'm trying to do on this channel. So if we jump straight in, as always, I go through the overall clause requirement. So that clause requirement is what I feel overall the message of this clause is. What is it asking us to do? And then following on from that, let's take it sub-clause by sub-clause of how we're actually going to achieve that overall clause requirement. So the overall clause requirement of clause 9.3 is to undertake a management review at planned intervals and in accordance with the inputs and the outputs of the international standard. So I'll read it once more. It's to undertake a management review at planned intervals in accordance with the inputs and the outputs of the international standard. And the standard we mean 9001 2015. The general structure of this clause is that it's split into 3 subclauses. So the first subclause, as always, is a general clause, basically just gives you what I would explain in the overall clause requirement. The second subclause is the management review, or the MR inputs, so they're the things that would go into the management review. And then finally, the third subclause of clause 9.3 is the management review outputs, so that's the things that would come out of the management review. So clause 9.3 is made up of 3 subclauses, and they are the 3 subclauses which make it up. So what we'll do now is we'll take it subclause by subclause and explain how you yourself can conform to their individual requirements. So if we jump right in. The first one, as I mentioned before, 931, is a general subclause, and I won't go any more detail on that. I feel that's sufficiently covered in the overall clause requirement, which is a couple of slides back. The second subclause is management review inputs, or MR inputs, and that's what we're going to look through. So when I say inputs, I mean obviously the things that we need to put into the management review in order to ensure that it conforms to the requirements of 9001 2015. So what I've put here is consider, and you may want to refer to the standard. I've taken these pretty much and added my own little bits in here, and in my own words, what I feel needs to go into the management review. So consider actions from previous meetings. So previous meetings, we mean any quality meetings, any performance meetings on the business, and also any previous management review meetings, although from my guess is that if you're watching this video, you haven't had one before. If you have, great, and you're looking to improve it, make sure you stay tuned. The second bit is any changes in internal and external issues. So they could be issues related to the business, or also look at maybe interested parties, that type of thing. Next one, performance of the quality management system. So this could be a wide array of things. It depends what your quality management system includes, but look for areas where you can monitor performance and then look to maybe put that information and discuss that information in your management review. So this could include things like, if you're in a warehouse, you could have picking errors or picking performance. You could have rates of picking. You could have sales input effectiveness or errors. You could have logistics and transport performance or errors in breakages, that type of thing. So consider the areas or the KPIs, key performance indicators, that you can measure in your organisation, and make sure they're included in this area. Some examples I've done is, and the easier ones are, internal audits, so results from your internal audits that you've done throughout the year. Any non-conformities you've had, so they could be supplier non-conformities, customer non-conformities, they could be related to internal issues, a wide array of different non-conformities raised. Supplier and subby performance, so supplier or subcontractor performance, who's doing well, who's doing okay, and who's doing not so well. And for the ones that are doing really well and not so well, is there anything we need to put in place to make sure they're doing better or maintaining that level? So discuss that. What actions can we put in place to ensure our supplier and subcontractor base is maintained or improved? Quality objectives. So what have you set, or what would you like to set in terms of quality related objectives? Try to set something that's meaningful. Don't try to get the number of objectives up just for the sake of complying with a standard and ticking a box, because that's never good. So make sure they are good for your business and they are real targets and objectives that you're setting. Things that when you reach them, you're happy about reaching them. And hey, by the way, just to mention, you don't have to meet your quality objectives. If you're recording what they are and you put a status of where you are, whether you're achieved or not, and a rationale or a reason behind that, that's sufficient for the standard. I would recommend documenting that. And if you want a video on that, please do let me know and I'll be more than happy to develop one. The last thing I put here is process performance. So how is your sales process working? How is your purchasing procedure working? How is your production working? How is your complaints procedure working? All these things, how are our processes working? If they're working well, how do we maintain them? Once again, if they're not working so well, how do we improve them? What actions do we put in place to make sure that going forward, them processes are better or performing better? The next thing I would mention is resource adequacy. Do we have the resources we need in the organisation in order to fulfil the product or the service that we're trying to provide? Next thing, review risks and opportunities. So look at the risks, look at the opportunities that you've developed. You may have a risks and opportunities plan. Again, if you don't and you'd like a video, let me know. But once you've developed this risk and opportunities plan, review it and make sure the review in the management review is documented in the management review, and also maybe put a date on that. So you can say the risks and opportunities plan is looked at and reviewed at management review, and the review date is on the plan, and it's also confirmed that it was reviewed in the minutes, which we'll come on to, of the management review. The last thing I put is any opportunities for improvement. So throughout this little subclause I've been mentioning, what are you going to put in place, actions to put in place. So here is, what are your opportunities for improvement of your system? Because obviously the system is built around the plan, do, check, act. The general idea is to always try to improve, never stand still, never go back, but always trying to improve, continual improvement. Okay, and the final subclause is 9.3.3, which is management review outputs. So similarly, I put consider the opportunities for improvement implemented. So what have we decided to implement? Any required changes to the QMS or the quality management system. So once we've reviewed all this information, we've had a discussion, do we think that things need to be changed? Are we happy? Or anywhere in between? So just make sure that's documented, what you decided. Next thing, resource needs related to either the organisation or the QMS. What resources do we need? Do we need another person in sales? Do we need to train our sales department? Do we need a new purchasing system? Do we need to send someone on a health and safety course? There's various resource needs that would be relevant and will come up and again with an organisation. The management review is a good time to capture what you're going to do, and then when you follow on or you do another management review or an interim meeting, you can see whether that's being achieved. The objectives are the quality objectives. What quality objectives are you going to set? You've decided and you've discussed in the inputs. Now what are the outputs? What are the targets and objectives? I would recommend putting these onto a statement or publishing these somewhere so that people can see them and they're communicated to not only you, the top management, but also all members of staff and also any subcontractors and suppliers. The final thing is reviewed risks and opportunities plan. So as we mentioned before, make sure that risks and opportunities plan is developed, reviewed, and the review date or the fact that it's been reviewed has been documented. And there'll be many more outputs, I'd imagine. And finally, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it.
Now clause 10, improvement. Continual improvement and non-conformity and corrective action. And this is actually useful root cause analysis, 5 why, and fishbone diagram.
This course is intended to teach an individual or group with no prior knowledge of root cause analysis, as well as provide the knowledgeable individual an excellent review of the concepts. We recommend that someone with prior experience and training with root cause analysis teach the course. If not being used as a course, valuable information can still be attained by following through the presentation. If you have questions, please visit www.biz-pi.com. Here's an overview of the course content. We will review the definition of root cause, the benefits of performing root cause analysis, review a recommended problem-solving process that contains root cause analysis steps, provide examples of problems addressed to root cause, things to keep in mind when performing this analysis, and finally a summary review of the course. Upon completion of the course, participants will be able to understand the importance of performing root cause analysis, identify the root cause of a problem using the problem-solving process, and understand the application of basic quality tools in the problem-solving process. Here are some root cause definitions. The causal or contributing factors that, if corrected, would prevent recurrence of the identified problem. The factor that caused a problem or defect and should be permanently eliminated through process improvement. The factor that sets in motion the cause and effect chain that creates a problem. Or the true reason that contributed to the creation of a problem, defect, or nonconformance. Perhaps you have your own example or definition. Root cause analysis is part of a complete corrective action process. Getting to root cause is only half the battle. Preventing the root cause requires many more additional steps, such as identifying the problem, containing and analyzing the problem, defining the root cause, defining and implementing the actions required to eliminate the root cause, and validating that the corrective action prevented recurrence of the problem. Here are the benefits for why your company should take the time on every problem to analyze down to the root cause. You'll be saving time and money because problems are not repeated, problems are prevented in other areas, communication improves between the groups, the process cycle times improve since you've taken out the rework loops and the defects, and you can secure long-term company performance and profits. And with less rework and defects leads to increased profits. When should we perform root cause analysis? Well, basically all the time. When you do not dig into a problem deep enough and get into the details of the problems, you should expect them to continue to recur time and time again. Some of the reasons why problems occur include supplier defects, scrap problems, audit findings, safety issues, budget problems, machine defects, excessive inventory, computer issues, and human errors. Here's the usual versus preferred approach to problem solving. In most companies, when a problem surfaces, we firefight and try to put out the fire immediately. This involves some kind of quick fix or workaround to keep the process moving. Just as we find an acceptable band-aid fix that works, another fire starts somewhere else and we rush to fix it. We never take the time to revisit these fires to figure out why they happened in the first place. Keep dealing with the same problems over and over again. The preferred approach is similar. First, we develop a quick fix for the problem. However, instead of rushing to the next issue of the day, we take some extra time to do root cause analysis so that same problem is not tomorrow's big fire or shows up again. We then implement the process change and check to see that it does not return. And we institutionalize the solution so other areas and groups do not have the same problem as well. Which one of these approaches will take longer to complete? Obviously, the preferred approach will take much longer. So why should we take that extra time? We must think in the long term. In 6 months or a year from now, do we want to be dealing with the same number of problems as we are today, or do we want to have more time available to work on improving the process and other value-added activities, such as risk mitigation and prevention? If the problem is not stated in terms of money, you will have a hard time convincing management that it is worth fixing. It will also help you prioritize problems that have the biggest impact financially. Typically, we go after the most frequent problems, and we may be missing those infrequent problems that really hurt the company financially. Here's a basic example of how to attack a problem with the problem-solving process. These are television sets with a defective screen that escapes to the customer. Customers can be used as the internal customer, such as another process area, or the typical external customer, the one who pays for your product or service. First, we want to contain the problem. We want to make certain that the group or area, and in this case that's our external customer, that finds the problem does not see it again. So we put a containment around processes B, C, and D, because we're not sure which one is actually driving the issue. But we're trying to keep the problem from getting to our customer. Once we better understand where the problem originates, we then isolate our containment around that process, and we allow the other processes to go back to operating normally. These processes should not see the problem return. Finally, once root cause is determined and prevented through process changes, the containment effort should be lifted and the new process should no longer create defects resulting from the same root cause. There are three types of corrective actions. Immediate is the action done to stop the immediate bleeding. Permanent is typically done on a specific area or product to prevent the root cause from recurring. This is where most companies stop. Preventive is changing the process so the problem does not reoccur again in that area or in any other area in the future. This forces departments and groups to break down the walls and communicate for the good of the company. Here's an example of a transactional process showing the three types of corrective actions. If there is a documentation error, the immediate action is the reinspection of the paperwork for that specific error. This might also include reworking the document to get it back to an acceptable condition. The permanent action is the changing of the form so that it cannot proceed without the correct information going to the document in the future. The preventive action is the mistake proofing of all similar processes so that the error cannot be made again in the future in other areas. And if preventive action is not addressed, problems will return. Here is another example. For the immediate action, a part is removed and replaced in a product and it's retested. In the permanent action, a product is redesigned to account for the part variability so that it doesn't have a problem in the future. The preventive action is that we have a design process change, so we require that variation analysis testing on similar supplier parts on future designs. Here are some more examples of the difference between permanent versus preventive. Permanent would be trained employee on the proper machine use, where preventive would be made it training a requirement to new employees working in that area. Permanent would be updating all customers with latest software revision to fix a problem. And the preventive would be checking for those same software bugs and making it into a checklist to perform prior to release of the software. Permanent would be employee is fired for ethical violation. Preventative would be ethics training developed and provided to all employees. Here's a common, simple, and highly recommended 8-step problem-solving process. You may have another process that you use at your company, and oftentimes there's a lot of overlap between problem-solving processes, so hopefully the steps that we go through will be very similar. The first and one of the most important steps is to identify the problem to address. Meetings can be drawn out, and the teams can lose focus when the problem is unclear. It is very easy for teams to use meetings as opportunities to address other issues at the same time, which is taking them off track. The 5 W's and 2 H's approach can help you get there. Simply answer the who, what, where, when and why, and how many to help better define the problem. Here's a description of the 5 W and 2 H questions. For the who, we want to know the individuals or the customers associated with the problem. For the what, we want to know the problem statement or definition. The when is the date and time when the problem was identified. Where would be the location of the complaints, whether that's an area, facility, or customer segment. Why, if there's any previously known explanations or ideas. We'll get into the why as part of our problem-solving process. The how did the problem happen, and how will the problem be corrected? And the how many, the size and frequency of the problem. In most cases, a team of affected individuals should be brought together to discuss the issue. Problems can arise when the right people are not involved. Try and keep the team between 4 to 10 people. More than that can slow down the process. It is recommended that the team assigns a champion to oversee the problem until it is resolved. They may play an active role in the discussions or simply make certain the teams are meeting and that the progress is being made. They may also be responsible for taking issues up to leadership. As the problems become more defined and analysis starts to drive the team in one direction, it is normal for the team members to change. Initially, step 1 will have the most team members, and towards the end of the process, maybe only 1 or 2 people are still actively working the issue. During the root cause analysis step, new members may be asked to participate based on their expertise in a certain area. The following are keys to success for working in a group. First one is defining roles and responsibilities. Each member must know what they're expected to bring to the table. This assures the team that all needed areas are adequately covered before beginning. Second note is to identify external customer needs. What outputs and results are expected from the customer and how will they be communicated? At the end of the project, during, only when needed, those are the questions that need to be decided upon. Identify internal needs. What processes and procedures need to be followed and what systems are available or required. This may include corrective action process. Without the appropriate levels of management supporting the effort, the team will have a hard time implementing any actions or activities that will result from the team's efforts. Clearly defined objectives and outputs are essential, otherwise the team may try to attack issues outside the scope of the analysis or get sidetracked by other problems that each group may want resolved. If all members are not involved in the discussions, there will be less buy-in to the resolution. Identify members who are not participating and ask for their opinions. Try to prevent certain individuals from dominating the discussion. Good meeting location may not make the team perform any better, but it will prevent other distractions and issues that can really impact the team's success. Here are some other roles and responsibilities. The champion should be the mentor who can guide and direct the teams and be an advocate to upper management. The leader should be in charge of the day-to-day authority, calling the meetings, facilitating the team, and reporting up to the champion. A record keeper, or scribe, is the one who writes and publishes the meeting minutes, and the participants need to have all their ideas respected, keep an open mind, and know their roles within the team. The third step is to address the immediate action needed to keep the problem from spreading any further. Oftentimes this involves some sort of band-aid or containment effort, such as sorting of parts or paperwork, reinspection, rework, or recall. Whatever immediate action is done, it should only be temporary and not stay in place after the root cause has been corrected. A check should also be made to see that the containment and immediate action actually kept the problem from spreading any further. Don't just assume. When we verify the immediate action, we want to make sure that the activity implemented to screen, detect, or contain the problem was effective. We must verify that it was through running pilot tests and making sure that another problem does not arise from our temporary solutions. We also need to ensure effective screens and detections are in place so that we do not further impact the customer, and it gives us time until the permanent solution is implemented. Step 4 is defining the root cause. First of all, we want to brainstorm the possible causes of the problem with the team. We recommend the use of the cause and effect or fishbone diagram. After brainstorming, use the Pareto principle to determine which causes to focus on, or some sort of voting with the team members. After selecting the most probable cause, there is still more analysis to perform. Use the 5 whys methodology until you get to the root cause. The root cause will be a process that initially caused the problem to occur. People, departments, groups, or machines are not the root cause. Try to take the root cause one more step to make sure the team addresses the same problem as the company at the company-wide level or outside of their own department or group. Here's an example of the 5 whys with the Washington Monument. First of all, the Washington Monument was deteriorating. We first ask why, and we determine that it's due to the use of harsh chemicals. The second why, we figure out that they're cleaning it with the chemicals to get rid of the residue left from the pigeons. After the next Y, we find out that the pigeons were hanging around to eat all the spiders, which is why they were there making the mess. When we ask Y again, find out that the pigeons were there because there's a lot of spiders who were there eating the gnats that were near the monument. We ask Y again and we find out that the gnats were there because they were attracted to the lights at dusk. So we go down to a sixth Y and ask, why are there so many gnats there attracted to the lights? And we find out that the timing of the lights didn't change with the seasons, and so therefore it was offset. So as you ask why after each cause, you can start to appreciate how complex the problem might be. If you were to stop after the first why, you might try and change chemicals. But that wouldn't get the monument clean, and you might have to increase the frequency of the cleanings, which would incur additional costs. If you stopped after asking the second why, you might try and remove the pigeons from the area, which might also be costly. If you never get to the true root cause, you will often stop short of the best solution, which is to develop a system that self-adjusts the lights throughout the year. Anything prior to that solution will probably not be sufficient, and most likely will incur additional costs, such as exterminating the spiders and the gnats, turning the lights off too early, which might cause security issues, etc. In step 5, verification involves testing of the proposed solution to make sure it will do what the team thinks it will prior to a full-scale implementation. Oftentimes, the solution can create additional problems. If the solution will not work, it is better to find out in a beta or pilot test environment rather than under normal operating conditions. Let's discuss the difference between verification and validation. Verification assures that at a point in time, the action taken will actually do what is intended without causing another problem. Validation provides a measurable evidence over time that the action taken worked properly and that problem has not returned. In step 6, we are simply making sure to complete the action plans defined in step 5. You cannot verify or validate until all actions have been completed. If the actions are not fully completed or they're only partially done, the effectiveness of the solution will be jeopardized. Step 7 involves preparing the team for action once the data analysis of the solution is complete. Who should be collecting the data, and for how long? What type of data results will be deemed acceptable? Finally, in step 8, the team should review the data results to conclude whether the root cause was adequately defined or that the corrective action put in place was effective. If the problem still exists, go back to either step 4 and redefine the root cause, or step 5, readdress the corrective actions put in place. If the problem went away, formally close the problem and celebrate success. It is extremely beneficial if a financial savings impact of resolving the problem is calculated. Many companies will redistribute a percentage of the cost savings back to the team members to further support the importance of solving problems. Here's a first example we will go through. We're going to walk through this example using quality tools in the problem-solving process. The second example will be transactional process. Step 1, identifying the problem. A part polarity has been reversed on a circuit board. This may have been one incident or a recurring problem identified from a Pareto chart. We next identify the correct team members based on their roles in the company and how they can contribute to the problem-solving effort. The immediate corrective action is that we'll have additional inspection added after this assembly process step to check for reverse part defects. We also have the last 10 lots of printed circuit boards re-inspected to check for similar errors to see if they got out. We place our problem statement in the first box, then we ask the first why. Why was the part reversed? The team determines that the factory worker was unsure of the correct part orientation when performing the task. Oftentimes, teams will stop and assume that the problem is due to human error. This is not an acceptable root cause. Errors will always be made, so teams must dig deeper to find a way of making the process easier or find a better way of catching the problem sooner. We again ask why. Why was the worker unsure of the correct orientation? When we answer the question on this why, we find out that the part is not marked properly. The 5 whys implies asking why 5 times, but it could be more than 5. Asking at least 5 times forces the team to dig beyond their own knowledge of the process and make certain that they don't stop short of the root cause, which is usually only 2 or 3 times. In this step, we ask again, and we find out that engineering ordered it that way from the vendor without any part markings. So now the team determines that the engineering process does not adequately account for manufacturing issues during the selection or specification process. Notice that they did not put the blame on the individual engineer. Here are the permanent and preventative actions. The permanent solution will change the part for that particular problem. The preventive solution truly addresses the larger issue of selecting the parts correctly first time with orientation markings, instead of afterwards when the problem is found. Here's a second example, this one geared towards transactional or office-related processes. The problem is the department didn't complete their project on time. Here are the team members. In step 3, we apply the immediate action. The team applies additional resources to get the team back on schedule, and no new projects were started until the root cause solution of this project was completed. Why didn't the team complete the project on time? The team decided to use the cause and effect diagram to identify possible causes of the project's delay. Each cause is placed in the appropriate category. We use 4 different categories for this cause and effect diagram: personnel, procedures, materials, and equipment. Under the personnel, we identified 3 possible causes: lack of worker knowledge, lack of resources, or poor project management skills. Under equipment, we identify inadequate computer system. In the materials section, we identified inadequate computer programs or poor documentation. And under procedures, we identify a poor project plan. The team decides, based on experience and available data, to focus on the lack of resources as the major reason for the delay. So the team determines that the appropriate resources were not available when they were most needed to keep the project on schedule. That is only answering the first why in our 5 whys exercise. In the next why, the team determines that the project manager was not hired in time, which had a huge impact on the project schedule. The team keeps asking why, this time determining that the specifics for the project manager position were not clear and caused the human resources department to contact and interview some candidates who were not fully qualified. Instead of stopping and blaming the HR department, the team brings a representative from HR into the team to dig further. After some discussion, the team determines that there are some problems with the internal job posting process, which allows the job specifics for this position to be overlooked or not clearly defined. During the corrective action phase, the permanent action involves adding an additional full-time support person to the project. The preventive action addresses the process issue so that the problem does not happen again, which is to develop a checklist form with HR for submitting job openings in the future. Here are some hints about root causes and things to keep in mind when performing root cause analysis. Remember, just as one problem may have multiple root cause possibilities, one root cause may be causing multiple problems. When you do root cause analysis on a problem, you will have one root cause. However, if you look at all the possible ways in which it could go wrong, you will find multiple things that need to be improved. When you don't get to root cause, the process that creates it continues to send more problems, and the problems will eventually return. Many times a short period of time without recurrence does not mean the root cause has gone away. When at all possible, brainstorm what possible root causes might be so that you don't have to wait for a problem to arise before it is fixed. Prevention is the key. So let's review what we've talked about. You learned how to identify the root cause, why it is important, a process for proper root cause analysis, and how basic quality tools like 5 whys and cause and effect diagram can be applied to examples. If you have any questions about our root cause analysis training or
This is the end of details of ISO 9001 2015 standard. And let's continue next class for correlation matrix and case study. Thank you so much.